I'm Regina Donour, and I teach at Letcher County High School. I'm a high school chemistry and biology teacher, and I applied for an ARI grant to actually fund some field trips because I am really a science teacher who likes to do science. I like to get out and really examine science and get students involved in doing science. So what I did was originally wrote the grant to fund a couple of field trips for my students. We live in a beautiful area of the country, and there are really some pristine areas to visit here. You don't have to go to Gatlinburg to see beautiful water and beautiful mountains. You can stay right here in Letcher County and eastern Kentucky and do it. So what I did is that I wrote the grant to go to Bad Branch Falls and Pine Mountain Settlement School. And I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, so I'm going to slow down a little bit and introduce my students because they were the ones that I really wrote this grant for, to give them the opportunity to get out and be involved in some science. So Bree, I'll let you start first, okay? You're okay. Yeah.
Okay, I'm Bree Franks, and
You don't have to talk now, just tell them who you are. That's all I want you to do. And tell them that you're
I'm a junior at LCC.
Okay.
My name is Blake Watts, and I'm also a junior at LCC.
So these are basically two of my guinea pigs I took out to get them indoctrinated into the area around Letcher County. And so when I first did this grant, I wanted to look at some reasons for doing this, because not only did I want students to get out and work in the field of science to see what was involved, but I wanted them to also understand or address, I guess, their needs. Because one of the things that I'm really concerned about with these students is that they're not traditionally good with paper and pencil stuff. Many of the students that are in this class that I took are in the gap that we have for academic achievement at our school. And so I wanted to make sure that they had the experience of doing that. And so my objectives were, one, to get them doing science so that I could address their needs of learning. Also to address the fact that implementation of learning for kinesthetic learners, because these were definitely kids that need to be doing something. Also, I was addressing the next generation science standards, which is to deal with the enduring skill of developing models and using models. So basically that's what we were doing. So the first trip we took is we went to Bad Branch Falls. And for those of you who have never been to Bad Branch Falls, you should definitely make a trip there. It is about a mile hike up to the falls. It's a 60-foot tall falls, and you could actually drink the water out of that. I probably shouldn't say that. Someone from the health department would get on to me. But the water is pristine there enough that you could drink the water. So I'm going to let Austin talk. Was it Austin or were you? Huh? Blake was going to talk a little bit about it. Put that up close. Let's see.
All right, so we went to visit Bad Branch Falls. I learned a lot about the falls and about the conductivity of the water and also the oxygen and the pH. We also observed some microorganisms like the woolly adelgid and its infestation as being an invasive species, destroying the hemlock trees and almost wiping them out. We hiked up to the falls. We took some water samples. We found that the pH was pretty low, lower than what she thought it would be.
The pH was a little bit low for Bad Branch Falls. Usually the pH ought to run around 7, but it ran a little bit below there, somewhere between 5.5 and 6. So I was a little bit astonished that it was a little low. But it was the fall, so I think maybe the leaves, being a lot of leaves in there, might have had something to do with it. We'll talk about the invertebrates that we found.
Found a few microorganisms. Couldn't really find too many because we didn't really have enough time. But the ones that we found, we got to study and look at them, and we took them back to class with us and got to analyze them a little bit more, and we learned a lot about them.
Okay, do you remember why they're such good indicators of water?
Because they had
on the spot
they had gills, didn't they?
Yes, they do.
So that way they would be able to breathe in the water, which made the water clarity, proved that the water clarity was very clear, since they could breathe in the water.
What do you remember the significant about their gills?
Shoot.
It's okay.
I don't remember.
It's okay. Put him on the spot there. Their gills are on the outside of their body, and so they're very prone to any type of pollution that we have. Now, when we were up there, there were a couple of things that, and these are some pictures of the falls, and as you can tell, it's a bunch of kids wanting to get in the water and get wet and stuff. The conductivity he talked about is an indication of ions that are in the water, and so the lower the conductivity, the better the quality of the water. Doesn't have as much contaminants in it. The conductivity at this creek was somewhere around 50. The river is somewhere around 700. Your drinking water that comes out of your water faucet is somewhere around 800. So it's a real pristine area that has some beautiful water. And as you could tell, I could have that picture next to one in Smokies, and you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between the two. That's what you're looking for as far as the quality of water that's up in Bad Branch Falls, and that's within 20 miles of where our school is. We did several different tests of conductivity. We did pH. We did dissolved oxygen. We did temperature. And these are just some pictures of the students on the creek actually gathering the samples and taking those samples. And then these are some of the actual macroinvertebrates that we collected there that do have the gills on the outside of the lung. This is the gills on the outside of the body. This is the mayfly larvae, stonefly larvae, and we found a fish fly larvae as well there. And these are all good indicators of water quality, mainly because their gills are on the outside of their body, and therefore they're prone to any kind of pollution that you might have. You normally will not find these in the main river that goes through Letcher County. Then we took a trip in January to Pine Mountain Settlement School. And I'm going to let Bree talk a little bit about that trip.
We were broken into 3 groups on this trip, and our first group took a guide walk through the forest to study different species of moss that was growing on the trees and different species that would be living there. And then we discussed the ecology of the forest in the winter months, and then the other 2 groups were in the building and studied how you can identify different animals by their structures. Like if an animal has its eyes forward, it would be a predator, and if its eyes are in the back of its head, it would be prey. And then that way you could study them by their teeth or the way that their skull was measured.
Do you remember what a sagittal crest meant? Do you remember what a sagittal crest meant? No? The big ridge on top of the skull? I'm trying to put them on the spot here. Actually, we identified about 13 skulls, and you think, oh, I can identify. Most of these kids, a good many of these kids that I took, and I'll give you, for instance, out of 40 I took, 33 of them were boys. And most of these boys were outside hunters, fishers, so they knew a lot of this kind of stuff. So they thought they could identify the skulls real easily until they started getting into all the different mammals. And there are a lot of different little small ones, and it became hard. But they used a dichotomous key, and they were able to do it by the end. You could give them a skull, and they could use that key and key right through and what it means. But a sagittal crest, for those of you who want to know, the bigger your sagittal crest is, the stronger your jaw muscles are. And so therefore, the better you are at chewing. So you can be a better predator and stuff. So this is some pictures of them identifying skulls, keying them out with dichotomous key. Then when the project was over, or throughout the project, I was doing an evaluation of the project to see what kind of impact it had toward meeting the goals for my objectives. So I gave a pre and a post test. The Bad Branch Falls, I had taken kids there before, so I sort of had a pre-test for that one, pre and post test. But I'd never gone to Pine Mountain Settlement School. So I worked with the environmental educator there, and we developed like a 20-question test over the content that they would have. So I was looking at my endurance skills of using models, used it to gauge their learning to see if they had learned things from before and after, and to show evidence of my student growth. It was also my student growth for my evaluation this year was to increase models, the evidence of using models. And so I have a little bit of data here that shows kind of what happened. So this is, and I don't have my glasses on, This is the Bad Branch Falls. This is the pre and the post test, the performance on it. This is the Pine Mountain Settlement School, the pre and post test, and then I've just recently given my student growth post test, and this was my student growth for this year. Okay, so you can see that there was improvement in the learning for my students. So I felt like I met my objectives for the project that we had. So this is the information that I've got, or the people that presented. Jacob Cornett wasn't able to come today. But that was basically what we did. And I think my students enjoyed the trips, both of them. Yeah. They really got excited about the learning and getting outside and doing things in the area. Okay.
Yeah.
Other than being what?
Soaking wet.
It was all tell them about what the weather was like in January.
It was really cold. And then they'd be soaking wet, it was even worse.
Yep. We actually caught a couple of days. We caught a day between the snows in January that we actually were able to go. It was cold. It was probably in the 40s. It did rain while we were there, but nobody complained too bad. We went on the hike through Pine Mountain Settlement School, or through the area that they've got above there. So we were just thankful that it was time to go in and do the skulls after we had taken the hike. But they were all real troopers. Nobody really complained. I think most of them enjoyed Bad Branch Falls the most, but I think that was because of the weather. Because we went there in October, it was real warm and stuff. Yeah, they did enjoy that. So are there any questions? And I want to thank ARI for the opportunity to raise the funds for this, or to have the funds for this. Yes. I hope so. I have kind of, over the last several years, well, probably the last 10 or 12 years, I have either gone to Pine Mountain Settlement School, Bad Branch Falls, or Lily Cornett Woods. And I'm always out seeking funds because the problem is getting the funding for buses and for substitutes. And so I have, in the past, for the last several years, I've kind of continued to do that. So yeah, whenever somebody says, yeah, there's $1,000 here, I go after it. So yes, I hope to, because I'm also very much involved in water quality in my region for my community, and so what I hope to do with this, with all my students, is for them to realize that our area can be just as pristine and pretty as any other area that you go pay lots of money to go see. We just need to take a little bit better care of it.